Imagine beating world chess champions without knowing any chess opening. Imagine being the strongest chess player in the world without ever studying chess. I'm not talking about an AI chess engine. Let's go back to the 20th century. I'm talking about a servant who worked for a British lord in India, introducing the pure genius, Mir Sultan Khan. He never learned chess. He doesn't know how to read or write. He only knew the Indian rules of chess, which is different from what you play. But his master brought him to England and made him play the British Chess Championship. Sultan Khan destroyed world champions to win the whole event. Then he went back home. Who's this mysterious man? Most importantly, how did he do it? And why am I telling you all of this? Because I found out that he has been doing something different. His chess style is totally different from others. His thinking of chess is on a different level. He made his own strategies. So can we learn his chess style? Can we get deep into his mind? The answer is yes. I've studied his way of chess A to Z meticulously and crafted an arsenal of his strategies. I'm going to unfold all of his mysteries one by one. In the end of this video, you won't look at chess the same way. Before we get into his mind-blowing games against greatest players, we need to learn his mystery chess style. His main plan is very simple. Build a strong pawn structure. Destroy their pawn structure to create weaknesses. Clear up the diagonals to snipe the weak pawns on the king side. Open up their king side to create an attack. And the last one is unexpected. Try to keep the king in the middle without castling. Now I know this sounds very simple and easy to do, but it's not the same when you are playing. Because your opponent is not going to let you do whatever you want. But here's the catch. Sultan Khan's brain was able to oversmart the opponent and get everything done. So let's see how Sultan Khan do exactly that on the board. First of all, Sultan Khan doesn't play any openings, because he never learned them. He starts with d4 and knight f3 most of the time. Then he just develops pieces normally. He plays e3 and also f4 if possible. And this is called the stone wall structure. But you don't get to play this every single time. Also, the king must be safe if you play f4. Otherwise, this could be a big weakness. So here, if you ask anyone about this position of the white, they will tell you this is bad. And that's right, because you are not really fighting for the center. None of these pieces have gone to the middle of the board. They are not attacking anything. They are not putting pressure on the black pieces. So don't just throw your pieces like this until you are a secret genius like Mir Sultan Khan. Instead, fight for the center. Bring your pieces to the middle. But you need to focus on creating a strong pawn structure that's hard to break. Could be like this or this. And don't push any other pawns without a good reason. Also remember, the plan to build a good pawn structure could be different from game to game depending on how the game goes on. For an example, here we can see black is trying to put their bishop here. So we play c4 trying to block the bishop. Now you have to wait and see what they are going to do with their pawns. Here they play d5, our knight is also attacking this pawn. So when we take, they have to take back with the pawn and now their bishop is blocked. If they take with the bishop, we are very happy to trade our knight for it. Then we play e3 and again we have a strong pawn structure. But if we play e4 in this position, you can't have that beautiful pawn structure we had before. Now let's look at how to damage their pawn structure. If you wonder why I want to do that, the main reason is we can target their weak pawns and put pressure on them. So they have to defend it. It makes them busy. It makes it harder to move their pieces around. Normally players trade bishops for the knight when they can damage the pawn structure. But Mir Sultan Khan isn't a big fan of it. He tries to keep his bishops as long as he can. We will see why when we talk about attacking. This man literally forced them to push their pawns and weaken their own position. You can do this too whenever you see an opportunity. Here Sultan Khan would give a check to make them push the pawn. But let's say they had a knight to block. Then he would keep this pin until they push pawns to attack the bishop. But Sultan Khan almost never trade bishops for the knight. And whenever he sees an equal trade that would damage their pawn structure, he is not going to miss that. Now you don't have to play exactly like this. If you think trading the bishop for the knight to damage the pawn structure would give you a good position, go for it. Clearing up diagonals to snipe the king side. Sultan Khan loves bishop activities. It has to be his favorite piece. He always tries to place his bishop like this and keep the pressure on pawns. And it always happened to be a main attacking piece. But yes, his opponent not gonna let him do that. But look closely, this is a weakness. He knew that they have to create a weakness to block the bishop. Then he gets his pieces ready for the attack. When the right time comes, he attacked the weakness. So he would push pawns to open up the diagonal. But only after creating a promised attack. When this diagonal clears up, it's all over. He tries to keep the king in the middle. He doesn't like castling. He finds lots of advantages keeping the king in the middle. King behind this pawn wall is super safe. Look closely. His bishop is putting pressure on their king. But their bishops can't really put any pressure. Even if they do, it's really easy to defend. The king is so flexible in the middle. Extremely hard to target the king. The second thing is, you can create an attack from any side of the board. Doesn't matter where they castle. But remember, this is only possible if you have a strong pawn structure in the middle of the board. Now let's see how exactly Sultan Khan used all of these to destroy everyone. This is going to change the way you look at chess. The first game I'm going to show you was played against James Frank Marshall, one of the most genius attackers of all time in chess. He knows what Sultan Khan is. He knows all the strategies of him I taught you earlier. And he has a plan to beat Sultan Khan's all strategies. This is going to be an epic clash. Game starts with e4, e5. d4 pawn takes and queen takes. Mir Sultan Khan doesn't follow any book moves as usual. Frank Marshall took his d-pawn because he knows Sultan Khan likes to build that pawn structure in the middle. Knight c6, queen moves back. And they just develop pieces normally. Then Frank Marshall played d5, punishing white for not playing and opening that fight for the center. Takes, takes, takes. So clearly Sultan Khan not going to have the stone wall this time. Frank Marshall did this on purpose to take him out of the comfort zone. Knight e2, bishop g4, knight f4 attacking the queen. Queen goes back. Now try to think, why did Frank Marshall play bishop g4? Because he saw Sultan Khan is going to play knight f4 attacking the queen. So when the knight moves, this bishop is preventing white from castling long. If you block with the pawn, that's going to create a big weakness in the position. This is why you need to develop and castle quickly. Now Frank Marshall is punishing for not doing that. He is taking the full advantage of Sultan Khan's bad opening. So here, Frank Marshall is kind of forcing Sultan Khan to trade bishops like this. If you wonder why he wants to trade bishops, when black castles this side, this bishop is able to attack these two weak pawns. And this is an open position. It's hard to stop this bishop from lasering the king side. And Frank Marshall knows Sultan Khan's love affair with bishops. So that's why bishop g4 was played. But you already know he isn't going to trade bishops. Mir Sultan Khan surprised him with f3, creating this big weakness. And Frank Marshall gets absolutely pissed off. He feels so disrespected. This man doesn't follow any chess principles. He thinks he can beat him playing like a mad lad. So Frank Marshall decides to go all in. He plays a very silent move. Looks like it make no sense. But actually it's the only brilliant move in this position. I'll give you 10 seconds. Try to find the brilliant move for black. The move is long castle. If you've played long castle in this position, they would think you are an idiot. But when Frank Marshall played it, Sultan Khan knew that death is on the way. If you take the bishop, black plays bishop h4 check. You can't block with the pawn because rook e8 wins the queen. So king has to move. Rook e8 anyway. If you try to trade queens, it get even worse. Queen g4 check, discover attack on the queen. If you block with the bishop counter attacking the black queen, black sacrifice the rook. If you take with the queen, black gets a free knight. If you try to fork the queen and bishop, black sacrifice the second rook. Queen has to take and you are going to lose your rooks. So that's why Mir Sultan Khan can't take this bishop. Instead he plays long castle, finally getting the king out of danger. And Frank Marshall plays rook e8 and says I'm gonna beat you being down a bishop. Sultan Khan takes the bishop. Frank Marshall plays bishop b4, attacking this bishop one more time. And also it's a discover check on the queen. This queen is guarding this bishop. If it moves away, the game is over. But there's only one move that can save the game, and that is queen f2. Sultan Khan finds it. Queen still guard the bishop. Also queen guards the back rank and the knight at the same time. But Frank Marshall knew he would find this move, which is why he prepared bishop c5 attacking the queen. If you take the bishop, it's a forced mate. So once again, only one move can save the game. That move is queen f3 guarding the back rank. Since this bishop doesn't attack this anymore, queen doesn't have to guard it. But the attack doesn't end here. Frank Marshall knew he would find that move too. That's why he prepared rook e3 attacking the queen. If you take the rook, bishop takes back with a check. The king moves, it's mate in 2. The queen takes the bishop, it's mate in 1. So what is white gonna do? Well, again, there's one move that can save the game, and this is the only move Frank Marshall missed. But you know Mir Sultan Khan doesn't miss. The move is queen d5. We are blocking this file so they don't have any checkmates. If black decides to trade queens because he can win the knight, white can play bishop c4 attacking the both rooks. By the way, white can't take this rook because bishop takes back with a check and you have to block with the rook, otherwise it's mate. But now white can take this because now the rooks are connected. So in the game, Frank Marshall played queen e7 guarding everything. Queen f5 check. King moves, knight d3 and black pieces are hanging. Takes. Frank Marshall tries his best to create something, but there's nothing. In this position, he plays queen e6 and resigned. So that's how Sultan Khan survived the legendary attack of Frank Marshall. This game was played against the former world champion Capablanca, one of the greatest players in the history. In this game, Mir Sultan Khan played the same opening he plays every time. And Capablanca is playing Queen's Indian defense. Just look how Sultan Khan used his pieces in this game. So here he plays a 3 to stop bishop b4, which is not a common move at that time. This shows that his thinking of chess is completely different from others. d5, takes, and as soon as black castles, Sultan Khan plays bishop d3, putting pressure on this weak pawn. He loves bishop activities. Black plays knight e4, attacking this bishop 2 times. Most players would trade bishops like this here because if you don't, this bishop is not doing anything important and it's kind of useless. But Sultan Khan keeps the bishop. Why? Because he loves bishops. Knight d7 and queen c2. He is trying to clear out this diagonal. So black is pretty much forced to play f5. See? That's how he create weaknesses. Then Sultan Khan plays knight b5, attacking this pawn. So black offers a bishop trade and Sultan Khan takes with the knight. He really wants to keep this bishop. Now Capablanca has an open diagonal close to the white king, which is why he gave away his bishop. So castling would be really good for white. But why do that when you can disrespect one of the most feared world chess champions in the history by playing h4? Only this man can play like this against Capablanca. Rook c8 and queen b3, putting pressure on this pawn. Just in case if h4 isn't gangster enough, here's g4, guarded by the bishop, and g5 attacking the knight. Knight undevelops. Here he can takes the pawn with a check, but he plays bishop g4 attacking the rook, and Capablanca plays rook c1 check. King moves, rook c2 check, and Sultan Khan sacrifice his queen for 2 rooks, because this bishop is stuck. The knight is stuck, and black has lots of weaknesses. This is what Sultan Khan does. He destroys the pawn structure of his opponent, and then he puts pressure on them. So they have to defend that weakness forever. Capablanca gives a check. King moves. Queen comes in, but actually it's useless. Queen can't fight alone. Sultan Khan tries to trap the queen, but the queen gets out. Then he slowly improves the position while keep putting pressure on this weakness. That knight has to guard it forever. None of this would be possible if Sultan Khan had traded this bishop. Queen can't take this because white can play bishop s6 attacking the bishop and the queen at the same time. Then he slowly pushes his pawns forward because he knows black can't do anything. So no need to rush. Suddenly black has 3 weak pawns now. Capablanca tries his best to create something. But once again you can't take this because it would give white a passed pawn and nothing can stop it from queening. So few moves after Sultan Khan gets his rook to the 7th rank. And he is going to make a queen. Black can't stop it. So Capablanca resigned after rook b8. Don't think Capablanca had a chance because he had a queen. This was Sultan Khan destroying Capablanca, sacrificing the queen, pushing pawns on the king side. This was a man playing with his grandchild. If you are still watching, you are lucky, because this game is a great example of Sultan Khan's chess style. All of his strategies works perfectly in this game. He starts with d4, knight f3 as usual, and develop pieces normally like every time. Doesn't really tries to fight for the center. Then he plays f4. The stone wall structure. He is always going to create a strong pawn structure. Black castles. Looks like it's not the right move, because we know how much Sultan Khan loves bishops. But then he plays f5, thinking he is blocking the bishop. But we know this is exactly what Sultan Khan wanted. Then Sultan Khan plays knight f3, and black brings back his knight to stop this checkmate. Bishop d2, developing move, and black offers a bishop trade, which is a good move, because this is going to be really powerful. Sultan Khan plays rook g1. Of course, he isn't going to castle. He is trying to play g4 to open up this file. Black trades bishops and Sultan Khan takes back with the pawn. Now he controls this square so knight can't get in. And also he gets an open file. Then he plays king e2. He doesn't need to castle. King is safe. Black plays c5 trying to break this pawn wall and open up the white king. But this is a huge mistake. Sultan Khan uses this as an opportunity to develop his bishop. Black brings his knight forward, putting pressure on this pawn. Looks like black has something. But Sultan Khan plays g4 to open up the file for the rook. It's clear. This is the Sultan Khan's plan. He keeps a strong pawn structure to keep the position strong. Then he pushes pawns on the king side to open up the files and create an attack. And he is trying to clear out this diagonal and activate the bishop. Black's attack is too slow, so they have to play defense. Black starts trading some attacking pieces, but it's already over. After those trades, this diagonal has been cleared out. Now there's no way to stop the attack. That's why black resigned after rook g1. Black had to trade this bishop. That's where they lost. And look at these pawn structure. The king is completely safe. So this is how Sultan Khan destroyed everyone in the British Chess Championship. I hope this video has changed the way you look at chess. Try to focus on a plan like this. You will slowly improve your skills. Following chess principles to build a strong position which leads to a winning endgame is smart. But that's not what we are talking about today. This video is about the most feared chess player in the 20th century. That's why he can't be a man of chess principles. He learned chess in his 30s and had a very short chess career. If I asked you to guess the most feared chess player, you would probably say Fischer or your favorite Mikhail Tal. But sorry to break this down. This man took the soul of Mikhail Tal. Later in his life, Mikhail Tal said something about him, which I will tell you later. But now, it's time to introduce you to the absolute legend. Rashid Nezmetdinov. From Kazakhstan. He used to play checkers. So he didn't learn chess when he was young. When he got into chess for the first time, he was in his 20s. He got bullied by everyone due to a lack of knowledge in chess. So he wanted to take revenge. But then he got ill and never got a chance to focus on chess until he was 30. I wish that was the end of problems, because then the World War II happened. Rashid had to wait for more years to become a chess player. He was 34 when he started to play chess. He was a sacrificing beast. I know you've seen crazy sacrifices, but the difference is that he isn't sacrificing for a checkmate. It's like the game just going normally, and out of nowhere he is like boom, boom, boom. And his opponent is like, what the fuck? Boris Spassky, Mikhail Tal. They were glad this man didn't play chess before. He has the most unbelievable sacrifices you will ever see in your life. You need to take inspiration from his thinking if you want to go to the next level. That's why we are going to look at 3 iconic games of Rashid. First game I'm going to show you is a special game in the entire chess history. I'm not going to spoil it. You will see what's special. It's a game you have to watch before you die. The second game is Absolute Destruction. Crazy sacrifices, just a normal day in Rashid's life. The third game is my favorite because it's a battle of 2 absolute beasts. It's like Godzilla versus Kong. It's like Tal versus the evil Tal. When I say it will blow your mind, that's a promise. Rashid starts with e4 and Chernikov plays the Sicilian defense. d4, takes and g6 trying to activate the bishop. And they just develop pieces normally. After a few more moves, Chernikov plays knight g4 trying to trade knights like this. But this is a mistake. This activates the white queen, which is the last thing you want. And Rashid plays queen h4, immediately putting pressure on this weak pawn. Queen a5 from Chernikov, hoping for long castles. Because white is trying to create an attack on this side, so it's better to castle long. But if he does that, black will create an attack first. That's why Rashid decided to castle short. Bishop f6 is a great move. If the queen goes here, black has a discover attack on the queen. If the queen goes here, black queen can take the knight and fork the white queen. It's an equal trade, but white's pawn structure is destroyed. So this will be an easy winning endgame for black. Chernikov might have calculated all of this when he activated the white queen. So it's not a bad move after all. Chernikov knew that 60 years later, he will be in a chessline video because of his insane calculations. But unfortunately, he forgot the name of his opponent. Rashid Gangster Nezmetdinov. In this position, he sacrificed his queen for a bishop. And that is the greatest queen sacrifice in the entire chess history. Why is it so great? Because it doesn't lead to a checkmate or anything close to that. The point is that Rashid believes that if he can get rid of their good bishop and the good knight, he can win this game without a queen. Imagine how confident you have to be for this. You might have seen Hikaru sacrificing the queen for no reason against lower-rated players. That's what Rashid was doing to the top players. So here, if black takes the queen, white takes the knight. Then white will start an attack like this. So Chernikov plays knight e2 check and gives his knight first before he captures the queen. Because the knight has to go back and that will slow down the attack. But that doesn't do much. Rashid goes back to the c3. Chernikov manages to defend the pawn with the rook. That's the only advantage he gets from that knight check. But Rashid reminds him that he also has rooks. White has 4 attacking pieces staring at a king. This attack is so strong. There's only one way to stop this. Black has to trade off some of white's attacking pieces. But instead black goes for this bad rook. Rashid kicks out the queen. Then he plays knight f6 sacrificing the rook. If black takes the rook, white gives a discover check and the game is over. So Chernikov went for the rook that plays in the attack. Rashid plays knight h7 discover check. Can't take the knight because rook f7 completely wins the game. So king moves back. Rook h3 and black blocks the bishop with the rook. Because rook h8 is checkmate. Rashid attacks the rook with a pawn. Chernikov takes the rook. Then he tries to give up a rook for this bishop while the other rook is hanging. Rashid says no thank you. b5, looking to play rook c4 to remove this bishop at least. Rashid plays knight g5 threatening this. But rook c4 is still possible since it blocks the bishop. But he plays rook c7 thinking he can get both knight and bishop for the rook. But he forgot he was playing Rashid. After the bishop takes rook takes, Rashid played rook h8 sacrificing another rook. King has to take and knight takes rook is a royal fork. Queen is gone and this is an easy endgame for white. That's why Chernikov resigned in this position. Black can't save any of these pawns. Surprisingly, Rashid was never accused of harassment. Second game was played against Lev Polyagevsky. He is also one of the best players of that time. This time Rashid is playing black. In the opening, they just develop pieces normally. Nothing special until Rashid plays knight g4 and queen h4. If white castles, it's checkmate in 1. Even Magnus Carlsen fell for this. But luckily white didn't remove like Magnus did. So here you can see Rashid already getting his pieces to the attack, but white pieces are just stuck in their side. Bishop h6 and queen undevelops. And Rashid closed that diagonal to make sure white queen never gets out. Knight d5 attacking this pawn. Rashid plays g4 trying to open up the king. White plays g3 attacking the queen, and Rashid accepts the offer. Then white plays f4 attacking the knight. He is trying to take the king into the middle like this. I know it doesn't look like the strongest plan, but it's not like white has other options. However, Rashid didn't play the knight check. He just developed his bishop sacrificing the knight. Because after white takes the knight, Rashid has bishop e3. White can also play knight c7, which is a fork. But Rashid's attack is just faster, so he just played bishop c2. Then he took the king to the middle, but this is exactly what Rashid wanted. First, he removes a knight who's defending this pawn. White plays rook h1 to kick out the queen before Rashid does anything. But unfortunately, he forgot his opponent was Rashid. When the attack is ready, he doesn't need a queen. So while the queen is hanging, he decides to hang a rook as well. If White didn't take the queen, the attack goes on and White can resign. So he took the queen. Rook f3 double check. King moves and it has no more legal moves. So Rashid plays c5, it's not checkmate, because White has en passant bishop d3, creating an escape square for the queen. But Rashid forces the king forward, forward, and forward. And there are multiple ways to checkmate here. But knight d5 is beautiful. His opponent had to see a doctor after the match, and that's very understandable. Now it's time for the best clash. Rashid versus Tal. Rashid starts with e4 and Tal goes for the Sicilian. After a few more moves, instead of developing pieces, Rashid goes all in. f4. g4. He pushes all pawns in front of the king. Imagine playing like this against Tal. Knowing what Tal said about Rashid, I'm sure Tal was shocked to see this. Now Rashid can play g5, but first he stops Tal from advancing. So Tal decides to play e5, asking Rashid to do whatever he's going to do with pawns. But Rashid plays knight f5. Tal isn't sure what's Rashid trying to do, so he tries to kick out the knight. But this is exactly what Rashid wanted. He takes the e-pawn, attacking their knight, but the main point of that move is to activate this bishop. So now he can play knight h6 instead of going back. Tal plays knight e6, looking to plant his knight here and block the bishop. Rashid plays bishop g2, activating the rook and attacking this knight. Tal wants to keep the knight here, so he defends it with the bishop. He wants to keep pressuring these pawns, and after this pawn moves, he will play knight h5, knight f4, and knight d4. But unfortunately, he forgot he was playing Rashid, because in this position Rashid sacrificed the rook. And just like in the other game, there's no straightforward attack on the king. He just wanted to play knight d5, attacking both queen and the bishop. Black can't take the knight, it's too dangerous. So Tal moves the queen back, defending the bishop. And Rashid attacks the bishop one more time. Tal blocks the queen. Rashid has to take the knight with the bishop, otherwise Tal will trade knights and the rook sacrifice makes no sense. So takes, and Rashid plays e5, attacking the bishop. If they take the knight, Tal is going to lose the queen. Most importantly, it's checkmate. So Tal takes the pawn, Rashid pin the bishop. Tal defends the bishop, and Rashid plays knight f6, sacrificing the knight. Queen takes and Rashid brings his queen to d4. The bishop is pinned. King moves, rook takes bishop. Tal tries to trade queens, but Rashid doesn't care, because he's sacrificing another rook. Tal is helpless. It's a check and a discover attack on the rook. Takes, check, and Tal resigns, because the only legal move is king d6. And knight f7 wins the queen. Also, he's going to win the bishop. This is the day that Tal felt the fear. And later in his life, Tal said one of the best days of his life was when he lost to Rashid. That's how much he was impressed by this. But I have one final question for you. What if Rashid plays against Mir Sultan Khan? Who would win? I want you to take this video very seriously. Usually, you get motivated after watching videos like this to become the next Bobby Fischer. But you get absolutely destroyed as usual. This video is different. If you are under 2000 ELO, that's because you still haven't reached your full potential of positional understanding. Let me explain. The foundation of a chess position is the pawn structure. Pawns are the soul of chess. But to build a strong pawn structure, first you need to understand how to place them without weakening the position in the opening. You need to understand how to place them in a way that makes it harder for them to get through in the middle game. And you need to have the ability to take advantage of pawns in the endgame. This is the way to become a strong player. And this is the main point of Caro-Kann defense. Instead of going for the aggressive attacks, we are trying to follow all the chess principles and be safe. Be simple. Simplicity is a strong thing in chess. The best example I can give you is the former world chess champion Mikhail Botvinnik, who's known as the Caro-Kann player. He didn't do any crazy sacrifices and mind-blowing tactics to become the world champion. His chess style was so simple. Anyone can understand his moves, but his defense was unbreakable. Even Mikhail Tal couldn't find a way to break through. So I'm going to teach you exactly how to use pawns in the opening, middle game, and end game. Also, I have prepared real game examples for you to understand it better. But I know it would be still harder when you are actually in the game. Which is why at the end of this video, I'm going to give you exercises you can do to improve your understanding of how to use pawns, so you can finally try something new to improve. The first game we have is a game of the rising star Gukish. His opponent is G. Fowler, who's over 60 years old, I think. And this was played in the World Rapid Team Championship 2023. E4, C6, D4, and D5. First two moves of Caro-Kann. Now you have to see how the position changed after the first two moves of the game. Before white played E4, that pawn was used to guard these two squares. After E4, these two squares are still defended. Now E-pawn controls these two squares, and queen and bishop control these diagonals. This is why E4 is the best first move. Now in this position, Fowler chooses to push, which is the advanced variation. Bishop F5, you need to get the bishop out before you close the diagonal with E6. And this bishop is controlling this diagonal. Here Fowler played C4, which is not a very common move in this position. The idea is to play C5 and close the center. And no one wants to take here because if black takes, that will just ruin the pawn structure. If white takes, this rook will get an open file, which is very useful in the Caro-Kann. So Gukish played E6 and now black has this unbreakable pyramid pawn structure. This is the whole point of Caro-Kann defense. Both players develop knights. Knight D7. And white closes the center with C5. Now black has a strong pawn structure, so then we should look for a way to ruin their pawn structure. Gukish plays B6 attacking that pawn. If white takes, this knight will get to control these squares. So white doesn't want to take, but also white doesn't want to ruin the pawn structure like this. So what should white do? Can you figure it out? Well, the best move for white is B4, defending this pawn one more time. So when black takes the pawn, white can take it back and still have this structure. As white, you need to do that calculation before you play C5. Then Gukish plays A5, threatening to win a pawn because white can't take it back. The rook is undefended. So Fowler played bishop E3, defending the rook. Now you can trade pawns like this, which is very common in this position. But also you can just leave it like this because if white takes, you can just take it back. That's what Gukish thought as well. So he played bishop back to G6, trying to put the knight here and pressure these pieces. White has two options here. The first option is to be aggressive and go for an attack with a move like H4, looking to trap the bishop like this. So black will be forced to play H6 or H5. Option 2 is just to develop pieces and improve the position because those pieces are yet to develop. What white shouldn't do here is play F4, and that's exactly what he played. It doesn't do anything. Gukish just played knight F5 as he was going to. And what is this for? That move just created a big weakness, and that pawn is going to be a target soon. If you try to keep defending that pawn, you are just creating more weaknesses. F4 is a good example of a bad pawn move. Then Fowler played bishop F2, getting the bishop out of danger. If you haven't forgotten already, we were trying to find a way to ruin white's pawn structure. Here Gukish has a brilliant move to do it. Unfortunately, he didn't play that move. He changed his mind, maybe he wasn't sure. But he saw that move. The move is knight takes D4, sacrificing the knight to destroy the white's pawn structure. This is why he wanted that knight there. After the bishop takes, we trade pawns and we get another pawn. So we are sacrificing a knight for two pawns. And now black got two passed pawns ready to run down the board. White pieces are still undeveloped and useless. At the grandmaster level, white is cooked here. But this didn't happen in the game. If this happened, this game would have been really famous. Gukish played H5, trying to create an attack on the king side, which is also enough. Fowler played bishop E2, and finally, Gukish decided to take the c-pawn. He didn't take the b-pawn because he wanted to keep the rook and control the b-file. Because since the king isn't castled, you need to make sure you are controlling both sides. Bishop e7 trying to get more pieces to the attack. And bishop d3 by Fowler pressuring the knight. Gukish played bishop h5 pinning the knight to the queen, literally asking Fowler to take this knight. Because it's really hard to tell what else he could have done. Even though he got a strong position, it's a bit harder to make progress. Also, he calculated after g6 and knight e6, the position has improved a lot. Now he has targets and open diagonals. Fowler played bishop e3 just defending pawns. That's how you know you are losing. Gukish castled, which means he is going to push this pawn and open up this file. By the way, if white takes with this pawn, it's even worse. Because black gets a passed pawn. Bishop has to go back. Queen can't take, there's a fork. So Fowler took with the f-pawn. After a few more moves, Gukish brought his pieces to the attack and the game was over. Rook f2 wins the queen, but Gukish plays rook f7 very calmly and Fowler resigns. He would have resigned like 10 moves ago to be fair. This game is a good example of how to use pawns in the opening and middle game. Second game I have for you is a game of the Caro-Kann player Mikhail Botvinnik. His opponent is Smyslov, more like SMY slow. And this was played in 1958 World Championship. This game is a great example of a middle game. Look how Botvinnik handled this middle game very calmly without any chaos. White starts with 2 knights. Botvinnik takes his bishop out before creating the triangle pawn structure. Then he trades that light square bishop for the knight. Because their light square bishop is going to be useless because of black's pawn structure. That's a common thing in Caro-Kann. Now the best move or black is e6 creating the pyramid. But Botvinnik developed his knight first, which is confusing for me. Looks like Botvinnik wants him to push the pawn and close the center like this. But if Simslov decides to push it more, this isn't going to be the best position for black. But anyway, Simslov didn't push. So Botvinnik played e6 and white played bishop e2 here, which is not the best move. White should play bishop d2 and go for an attack like this. You can't play slow and give time to Botvinnik. But that's exactly what he does. So Botvinnik gets to do everything he wants. Anyway, knight d7 and queen g3 pressuring this pawn. So black has to play g6 before moving the bishop. But this is okay for black. Bishop f4 trying to play the very annoying move bishop d6. Botvinnik plays queen b6 threatening to take this pawn, so white defends with the rook. Black castles. And after the opening, black has a great pawn structure. In the middle game, we need to break their pawn structure while we still have a good one. Bishop c7 attacking the queen. Queen d4, bishop f3 and Botvinnik played e5 here blocking the bishop. Bishop d6 attacking the rook. Rook develops. Bishop a3 and Botvinnik decide to take on d4. Now the d-file is open. As you can see, white pieces are very passive. They are not doing anything. So then Botvinnik played b5 looking to fork 2 pieces. White attacks the queen. Botvinnik plays queen b6. And b3 creating an escape square for the bishop. Now you can't fork because knight a4 attacks the queen. Knight c5 looking to put the knight here and control these squares. Botvinnik isn't planning a crazy attack on the king. He is just slowly improving the position without taking risks. I think he's respecting the name of his opponent. This is why he is the most principled player when it comes to chess. Bishop c1, queen c7 and knight e6 as planned. a4 and a6. Then white played a very unnecessary move b4. Now white can't control this square with a pawn. So if black can get a knight to that square, that's going to be really annoying for white. Because black can control lots of important squares on the white side. Simslov isn't playing the best game. In the other hand, Botvinnik is taking full advantage of Simslov's mistakes. This is what you need to do in the middle game as well. Bishop e2, queen e7. It looks like white can take a pawn, but after the queen take, black has knight h5 discover attack on the queen and white loses the knight. Here white took the b-pawn, which is a mistake. He had to play a5 taking the square, so black can't bring his knight easily. Now black pawns are controlling lots of space on the white side. White trades rooks. Bishop b6 attacking the rook and rook moves to a8. Here white plays the worst move of the game. This is an example for a very bad pawn move. f3. Now this diagonal is open. This bishop is blocked and it's useless. So this knight can get in. Rook a3 is coming. If the knight moves, you can take a free pawn because this pawn is pinned to the queen. Basically, the move f3 weakens the entire white position. If you play f3 in this position, you are supposed to bang your head on the wall and resign. I don't know what this guy was thinking. So Botvinnik plays rook a3, white defends with the queen. Bishop h6 controlling this diagonal. Bishop f1 was played, white was running out of moves. Knight d4 blocking the bishop, looking to bring this bishop here to the attack. If the bishop takes the knight, that would be just suicide. Instead, white attacks the queen moves. Bishop d3 making sure that rook doesn't come in. But here, white takes this knight and just like I told you, it's suicide. Bishop comes in, knight e5. I guess he was thinking of taking this bishop, but knight f6 was the best move. White attacks the knight and Botvinnik takes the bishop. White tries to keep the position still somehow. But look how slowly Botvinnik just broke his defense one by one. He is not in a hurry. He is playing the most principled way possible. After a few moves, Simslav understood this is just a waste of time. He is going to lose this game anyway. So he resigned in this position. The third game was also a game of Botvinnik in the same championship. Against the same opponent, of course. Smyslov. Hopefully this time he will do a better job. This game is mostly about the endgame. Watch how Botvinnik converts this into a winning endgame. In this game, Botvinnik decided to take the e-pawn and open up this diagonal early. Then he developed the light square bishop. White moves the knight back attacking the bishop and Botvinnik moves the bishop back. Don't bring the bishop here because you want to play e6 to build the pawn structure. Smyslov pushes the h-pawn trying to attack the bishop. So Botvinnik creates an escape square for the bishop. Then Simslav played bishop d3. Players traded bishops. But usually in this position white plays h5 forcing to move the bishop back. And then white plays bishop d3, making black move the bishop multiple times. Again, not the best performance from Smyslov. Bro hasn't learned his lesson yet. Anyway, queen c7, preventing the move bishop f4. So white plays bishop d2 and castles long. Black also castles queenside because otherwise black is going to get absolutely crushed. Botvinnik isn't going to invite that. Then here Botvinnik decides to play an aggressive move. c4. Not the most principled move, but it threatens lots of things. Takes and s6. Another weakening pawn move just to prevent knight b5. Don't play like that because you are not Botvinnik. Queen e2 making sure the knight never gets pinned. Bishop d6 and knight e4. Attacking the bishop right away. Players trade knights, Botvinnik kicks out the queen and then he plays rook d7 looking to double rooks. Smyslov played rook c1 looking to push this pawn and open up the diagonal to attack the black king. So if we just take a good look at this position, the material is equal but black has a better pawn structure. But black has a weak king. The white king is super safe. So what I think is, Smyslov has to take full advantage of the black king being weak. He needs to go for a quick attack. That's how he wins. But as black, you just have to make sure you don't get checkmated and you are going to an endgame. So Botvinnik plays queen c5 to stop Smyslov from pushing the pawn. Smyslov attacks the queen with the knight. Botvinnik gives a check. Smyslov blocks with the rook so he can double rooks. Here Botvinnik plays bishop c7 and allows Smyslov to push the pawn. Not sure why, maybe he didn't like the fact that he has to use all of his pieces just to stop the pawn. Then he will have to keep playing defense. And Engine agrees with Botvinnik. It's actually the best move. So Smyslov pushes the pawn continuing with his plan. Here best plan for Botvinnik is to play queen d3 and try to trade queens so you can go to an endgame without getting checkmated. Instead, he plays rook d5 and Smyslov pushes the pawn. Botvinnik can't take the pawn because the white queen can take this pawn with a check and he is going to lose everything. So Botvinnik plays bishop b6. Now white needs to double rooks and go for the attack without giving Botvinnik any time. Instead, he plays knight d2 and this is slow. Just like his name. He's giving time to Botvinnik. And Botvinnik offers a queen trade immediately. Knight c4 attacking the bishop and Botvinnik moves it back. Then Simslav trade queens. I don't think white needed a queen trade. But don't worry, that won't be the worst move. Smyslov here played knight e5, which is a blunder. Can you see why it's a blunder? The position was equal here and Smyslov was supposed to continue with his plan like this. But he missed a 1000 ELO beginner tactic. So Botvinnik took the bishop, and after rook takes, he took the knight as well. He got 2 pieces for a rook. It's a huge advantage, especially in the endgame. Then Botvinnik offers a rook trade and Smyslov has to take it. Otherwise it's going to get even worse. Now we are in the endgame. Knight d5, king c2, h5 stopping white from advancing. Then Botvinnik starts to create weaknesses. How can you create weaknesses? By forcing them to push pawns. Now he is pressuring this weak pawn and this rook has to defend. Then he takes his knight to attack pawns. So Smyslov hasto push them. Now black attacks this 2 times, so Smyslov has to push. He attacks again. White has to push again. And now this is a big weakness. White can't protect it, also white can't push it. Smyslov attacks the bishop. Botvinnik attacks the pawn. Rook moves to the 8th rank trying to target black pawns. But black can defend them easily. But instead of taking this pawn, Botvinnik played bishop f2, which is great because now white can't even threaten to take a pawn. If white push, you just take and make a queen. If this, just knight d6. So Smyslov pushes this pawn looking to create a passed pawn. Botvinnik attacked the rook before takes. Bishop takes the pawn and Smyslov pushes the pawn, the last hope. But there's no way he's gonna make a queen. But as black you have to be careful here. It's never too late to blunder the game. You can either give away your bishop to the pawn and push your pawn slowly to make a queen, which is unstoppable. That's the easiest way to win. Botvinnik should have done it. Or you can give checks and bring your knight to stop the pawn like this, which is the hard way. This rook has no moves. Then Botvinnik created a passed pawn, so white king has to stop it. Then he gives away his bishop to remove the rook and the pawn, which is the same thing I showed you before. This is a complicated version of it. Knight check and Smyslov resigned. Because the king can't go there, if he attacks the knight, the king defends. Now let's go to the exercise part so you can start improving in chess. First exercise I'm going to give you will minimize your blunders, mistakes, and inaccuracies. Start doing this from today. Here it is. Always look at all the squares you are controlling. Also, look at the squares your opponent controlling. This might not sound like anything special, but if you can do this from the first move to the last move of the game, you will be surprised how much better you have gotten already. Don't be in a hurry to play any move. Always do this before playing any move. Okay, now let's go to the second exercise. I already taught you what happens when you push a pawn. New diagonals get opened. If you are not careful, it's going to create lots of weaknesses. So the second exercise is, you have to create a good pawn structure without creating weaknesses. I'm not telling you to come up with something on your own. You can play Caro-Kann and create this pawn structure without creating weaknesses. Let me show you what I mean. First of all, don't give them any chances to ruin your pawn structure. And the second thing is, in this position, if you push this pawn, this diagonal opens up. So whites will try to put pressure and take advantage. So before you push this pawn, you need to calculate how to deal with that. For example, you can play h6 to stop that, or you can just play bishop e7. Here's another position from a game. Here you have to push this pawn before moving the bishop. So does that pawn move weaken the position? Definitely yes. So you have to calculate how to deal with that before you move it. Since this diagonal is open now, you have to put your bishop here and control it. So this pawn move won't be a weakness until you lose this bishop while they still have theirs. Now you have created a strong pawn structure without any weaknesses. And here's a very common Caro-Kann position. This diagonal opens up early, so they start giving checks and putting more pressure. So you need to calculate how to deal with that. And remember, you only have to take care of this diagonal until you castle. So make sure you can take care of it until then. So you have created a strong pawn structure without weakening the position. Try to do this in every single game. This is your plan in the opening. After you have mastered the exercise 2, you can start exercise 3. In the middle game, look for a way to ruin their structure and create weaknesses. Look for a way to win material. Not buy a lot. Just try to be a pawn. You can turn it into a big advantage later. If you manage to do that thing, you will go into a winning endgame. You will fail to do this, it will be hard. But keep trying until you can do it. Once you think you got it, focus on exercise 4. In the endgame, if you are up material, create a passed pawn, trade queens, and make a new one. Trade pieces until they don't have enough material to stop the passed pawn. After those trades, bring your king to the middle as well. Don't let them get close to the passed pawn. Cut off the king's path. They will have to give up material if they want to stop the pawn. This is just an example plan for an endgame if you are up material. Let's say you are a knight up. Then all you have to do is trade all other pieces. You will end up with a knight. Then bring your king to the middle and eat their pawns. And simply push your passed pawns to create a queen. Work on these plans, you will be really strong in no time. I hope this video was useful. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. If you want to learn a different chess style you didn't know, watch this video. In the world of chess, few figures loom as large or as dark as Bobby Fischer. His name evokes awe, admiration, and intimidation. Bobby wasn't just a champion, he was a destroyer. On the board, he annihilated opponents with a precision that bordered on ruthless. His skill was so overwhelming that it seemed almost inhuman. Fischer's life was a paradox. A young boy from Brooklyn rising to challenge the might of the Soviet chess machine. An icon who redefined what it meant to be a chess genius. And, to his rivals, a force that left them utterly defeated. But what made Fischer so special, so feared? How did a child who taught himself chess become the undisputed king of the game? To understand Bobby Fischer, we must first understand the world he entered. Post-war America in the 1950s was a place of optimism and innovation, yet the chess world was dominated by the Soviet Union. For decades, Soviet players ruled the chessboard, their victories reflecting their nation's intellectual superiority. Chess wasn't just a game, it was a matter of national pride. Enter Bobby Fischer, a brash, young American who cared nothing for Soviet dominance or tradition. At the age of 6, Fischer discovered an old chess set and became captivated. While most children his age were playing baseball or riding bikes, Bobby spent hours studying chess books and replaying the games of past masters. The Brooklyn Public Library became his second home, where he devoured every chess resource he could find. Fischer's obsession with chess was total. By the time he was 12, he declared his goal to become the world chess champion. At the time, such a statement might have seemed laughable. A child taking on the world's most prestigious and established players? But Fischer wasn't dreaming, he was preparing. The world first glimpsed Bobby Fischer's genius in 1956, at the age of 13. During the Rosenwald Memorial Tournament in New York City, Fischer faced Donald Byrne, an experienced international master. Fischer, playing as black, seemed to be at a disadvantage early on. Byrne pressed forward confidently, exploiting what appeared to be weaknesses in Fischer's position. Then it happened. Fischer played a move that shocked everyone. A queen sacrifice. For those unfamiliar with chess, losing the queen is usually catastrophic. It's the most powerful piece on the board. Yet Fischer gave it away as if it were nothing. Spectators and analysts alike were stunned. Why would a young prodigy throw away his most valuable piece? But Bobby wasn't sacrificing. He was orchestrating. What followed was a series of brilliant moves, each more surprising than the last. Fischer's play dismantled Byrne's position, turning what seemed like a reckless gamble into a masterpiece of tactics and strategy. By the end of the game, Fischer stood victorious, and his victory was immortalized as the game of the century. At just 13 years old, Fischer had proven that he wasn't just a prodigy. He was a force to be reckoned with. Fischer's rise didn't stop there. In 1957, Just 1 year after his stunning performance against Byrne, Fischer became the youngest player to win the U.S. Chess Championship. At 14, he was already the best player in America, a position he would hold for years to come. Winning one championship might have been enough for most players, but Fischer was insatiable. He went on to win 8 U.S. chess championships in total, including a perfect score in 1963, where he won all 11 games. To this day, no other player has achieved such a feat. Fischer's dominance in America was absolute. He wasn't just winning games, he was rewriting the rules. His preparation was meticulous, his strategies were innovative, and his focus was unparalleled. He studied his opponents obsessively, uncovering their weaknesses and exploiting them mercilessly. To face Fischer on the board was to face certain defeat. But why call Fischer a villain? The answer lies in his style of play and his impact on the game. Fischer didn't just aim to win, he aimed to crush. His victories weren't just points on a scoreboard. They were statements. Fischer would outthink, outmaneuver, and outlast his opponents, leaving them mentally and emotionally broken. His brilliance on the board was matched by his intensity off it. Fischer was known for his demanding nature, often insisting on perfect conditions before playing a game. To some, these demands seemed petty or egotistical. To Fischer, they were essential. He believed in creating the ideal environment for his genius to shine. And shine it did. As the 1960s came to a close, Fischer's dominance in American chess was undeniable. But his ambitions extended far beyond national titles. Fischer had his sights set on the ultimate prize, the World Chess Championship. To get there, he would have to face the greatest players in the world, many of whom were products of the Soviet chess machine. Fischer knew the odds were stacked against him. The Soviets had a monopoly on chess, producing generations of champions through rigorous training and state-sponsored support. Fischer, by contrast, was a lone wolf, a self-taught genius with no team or government backing. Yet he relished the challenge. This was the beginning of Fischer's path to immortality. The boy from Brooklyn was about to take on the chess world, one game at a time, leaving a trail of brilliance and devastation in his wake. Stay with us as we delve into Fischer's meteoric rise, his unmatched dominance, and the games that solidified his reputation as the greatest and most feared player in chess history. As Bobby Fischer set his sights on the world stage, his dominance grew even more terrifying. No longer content with being the best player in the United States, Fischer unleashed a reign of destruction that sent shockwaves through the international chess community. His victories weren't just wins, they were annihilations. Opponents left the board stunned, reputations in tatters. Fischer wasn't just playing chess, he was redefining the very limits of the game. This dynamic made Fischer's rise all the more remarkable and all the more threatening. For the Soviets, Fischer represented a direct challenge to their dominance. For Fischer, the Soviets were his ultimate adversaries, a chess empire that he was determined to bring down single-handedly. Fischer's international breakthrough came in the late 1950s and early 1960s. By this time, he had already established himself as a formidable player in the United States, but his performance on the world stage was inconsistent. In 1962, Fischer competed in the Candidates Tournament, the final stage before the World Chess Championship. Though Fischer showed flashes of brilliance, he fell short of victory, finishing fourth overall. For most players, this would have been a respectable result. For Fischer, it was a bitter disappointment. He blamed his loss on what he saw as collusion among Soviet players, who, he alleged, were agreeing to draw games against each other to conserve energy for their matches against him. Fischer's accusations may have been controversial, but they highlighted a stark reality. To become world champion, he would need to overcome not just individual opponents, but an entire system. Fischer's true path of destruction began in 1970. After a brief hiatus from competitive chess, Fischer returned with a vengeance, determined to claim the World Championship title. What followed was one of the most dominant runs in chess history, a period of unprecedented brilliance that left the chess world in awe. In the 1970 interzonal tournament in Palma de Mallorca, Fischer demolished the competition. Facing the best players from around the world, he won the tournament with an incredible score of 18.5 out of 23, finishing 3 points ahead of his closest rival. Fischer's performance wasn't just dominant, it was surgical. He dismantled his opponents with a combination of deep preparation, flawless calculation, and psychological pressure. But the interzonal was just the beginning. Fischer's next challenge was the 1971 candidates matches, a series of head-to-head contests to determine who would face the reigning world champion Boris Spassky. What happened next was nothing short of extraordinary. In the first round of the candidates matches, Fischer faced Mark Taimanov, a Soviet grandmaster and one of the top players in the world. Taimanov was confident, believing that his experience and preparation would be enough to handle Fischer. But Fischer had other plans. The match was a massacre. Fischer won all 6 games, a score of 6-0 that left the chess world stunned. Taimanov, humiliated and emotionally shattered, later said, "I couldn't understand what was happening. It was as if he was reading my mind." Next came Bent Larsen, a Danish grandmaster and one of the few non-Soviet players who had consistently challenged the world's best. Larsen was known for his bold and creative play, but against Fischer, he stood no chance. Fischer repeated his 6-0 performance, defeating Larsen with ruthless efficiency. By this point, Fischer had won 12 consecutive games against world-class opponents, an achievement unheard of in top-level chess. His dominance was so complete that it began to seem as though Fischer was playing a different game altogether. Analysts struggled to find weaknesses in his play, while opponents dreaded the idea of facing him. The final hurdle in Fischer's path to the World Championship was Tigran Petrosian, a former world champion and one of the most solid players in history. Petrosian was known for his impenetrable defense and deep strategic understanding. Many believed that if anyone could stop Fischer, it was Petrosian. Initially, it seemed like Petrosian might hold his ground. The first game of their match ended in a draw, and in the second game, Petrosian managed to defeat Fischer, a rare loss for the American prodigy. But Fischer quickly regrouped. Over the next 5 games, Fischer crushed Petrosian, winning 4 and drawing 1. The final score of the match was 6.5 to 2.5 in Fischer's favor, securing his place as the challenger for the World Championship. Fischer's victory over Petrosian wasn't just a triumph. It was a statement. He had defeated one of the greatest defensive players of all time with ease, cementing his status as the most feared player in the world. His final challenge was Boris Spassky, the reigning world champion and the pride of the Soviet chess empire. In 1972, the chess world witnessed a battle that transcended the board, a clash of titans framed against the backdrop of the Cold War. Bobby Fischer, the American genius, and Boris Spassky, the Soviet world champion, faced off in Reykjavik, Iceland, in what would become one of the most iconic matches in chess history. As the first game began, it was clear that this match would be unlike any other. The match began on July 11, 1972, with Spassky playing white. In a shocking twist, Fischer made a critical error in the endgame, blundering away a pawn and ultimately losing. It was an uncharacteristic mistake for a player of Fischer's caliber, and it gave Spassky an early lead. Game 2 brought even more drama. Fischer, unhappy with the presence of cameras, refused to play, forfeiting the game and giving Spassky a 2-0 advantage. At this point, many wondered if Fischer's demands and eccentricities would sabotage his chances. Even Fischer's staunchest supporters began to doubt whether he could recover from such a disastrous start. But then, Fischer did what only he could do. He turned the match around. In Game 3, Fischer requested that the game be played in a small backroom away from the main hall. To everyone's surprise, Spassky agreed. This unusual setting seemed to rejuvenate Fischer, who played with surgical precision, defeating Spassky in a brilliant display of positional mastery. The victory in Game 3 was a turning point. Fischer's confidence soared, and his play became increasingly dominant. Over the next several games, Fischer demonstrated his unmatched preparation and creativity. In Game 6, Fischer produced one of the greatest games of his career, employing the Queen's Gambit declined and outplaying Spassky in a masterpiece of strategy and technique. Commentators and fans were in awe. Fischer's moves were both logical and imaginative, blending classical principles with modern innovation. Game 6 is still celebrated as one of the finest examples of Fischer's genius, showcasing his ability to adapt to any position and exploit even the smallest weaknesses. As the match progressed, it became clear that this wasn't just a physical or intellectual contest. It was a psychological war. Fischer's demands and unpredictable behavior kept Spassky on edge. Fischer would arrive late to games, stare intently at Spassky during critical moments, and challenge even the smallest details of the match conditions. By the midway point of the match, Fischer had taken a commanding lead. His victories in Games 8 and 10 showcased his versatility and ability to dominate in both tactical and strategic battles. Spassky managed to win Game 11, but it was too little, too late. Fischer's momentum was unstoppable. In Game 13, Fischer played a bold and unorthodox variation of the Sicilian defense, catching Spassky off guard and securing another victory. With each win, Fischer moved closer to the title, and Spassky's confidence continued to erode. By the 21st game, Fischer had an insurmountable lead. Spassky resigned, and Fischer was crowned world champion. Fischer's victory in 1972 was more than just a personal triumph. It was a watershed moment for chess. For the first time in decades, the world chess champion was not a Soviet player. Fischer's brilliance had shattered the Soviet monopoly, and his victory brought chess into the mainstream spotlight. The match captivated millions around the world, drawing unprecedented attention to the game. Fischer became a global icon, his name synonymous with genius. His triumph in Reykjavik marked the peak of his career, a moment of unparalleled brilliance that secured his place in history. Bobby Fischer's victory in 1972 was the crowning achievement of a career defined by brilliance and intensity. After Bobby Fischer's departure from the chess world, the game evolved in ways that reflected both his influence and his absence. Fischer left a void that would never be fully filled, but his contributions became the foundation for the modern era of chess. More than just a champion, Bobby Fischer became a symbol of the limitless potential of human ingenuity. His brilliance, though paired with personal struggles, continues to inspire and challenge us, reminding us that even in solitude, the mind can illuminate the world. Bobby Fischer was a man of contradictions, brilliant and troubled, celebrated and isolated. Yet, through it all, he remained devoted to the game he loved. Fischer may be gone, but his shadow looms large over the chessboard, where his genius lives on in every move, every strategy, and every dream of mastery.